From 89.7 WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR, this is Lake Effect. I'm Audrey Nowakowski. Today we examine how higher education institutions in Wisconsin are doing amid challenges and changes. Then we'll learn how CCAP can be used as a useful and harmful tool for people in Wisconsin.
It comes down to someone searching CCAP, using that name, finding something, and just jumping with that, making conclusions, making assumptions.
Plus, we'll help you plan a trip to the Driftless region and learn why it's one of the best places in the country for fly fishing.
The nice thing about it is that you are in the most spectacular areas. You know, they say that trout don't live in ugly places, and as cliche as it is, it's definitely true.
All that's coming up on Lake Effect, but first, here are today's headlines. This is Lake Effect from 89.7 WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR. I'm Audrey Nowakowski. Thanks for joining us today. Milwaukee's higher education institutions are experiencing a wave of leadership changes. UW-Milwaukee, Marquette University, and MATC have all gotten new presidents or chancellors in the last 13 months. MSOE's new president will begin in January. So what does that mean for higher education at a moment when colleges are facing pressure from the federal government, state budgets, and students demanding affordability? WUWM education reporter Catherine Kokel put that question to Jason Stein. He's the president of the Wisconsin Policy Forum, a nonpartisan research agency that releases regular reports on higher education.
Before we get started, I'd like to mention to listeners that you can hear more on the state of higher education on September 8th. We at WWM have partnered with the Wisconsin Policy Forum to present a Policy in the Pub event. That'll be at 5 o'clock on September 8th at Merriment Social in Walker's Point. You'll hear from Jason, and then I will moderate a panel discussion between the leaders of UWM, MATC, MSOE, and Marquette University. I think I speak for us both when I say we hope to see you there. Jason, if you were to grade the certainty and stability of higher education in Wisconsin right now, what grade would you give it and why?
Well, thank you first, Katie, for having me on, and to WWM for partnering with us on that event, which I agree with you is going to be a great one, and we hope to see you there. In terms of a grade for higher education in Wisconsin, overall, to me, it looks like a B, doing relatively well, had some good things happen in the state budget. At the same time, some challenges at the federal level, some challenges with enrollment, some uncertainty around how AI will play out in terms of its impact on the institutions themselves. We're already seeing the impacts on classes and teaching and things, so on and so forth. But also going to be some impact, you would think, on the actual business of higher education. And, those grades really would range for individual institutions like UW-Madison or a Marquette University that are strong to, smaller private colleges in some places around the state have even closed in recent years as they've been hit by enrollment declines and other challenges, in the wake of the pandemic and just through demographic change and fewer students graduating high school in Wisconsin. So, it really is a mixed bag, but I think overall, some of the shakeout in terms of negative factors are already started to occur, and overall higher education is in a reasonably strong place in the state of Wisconsin.
I think that's a relief to hear because a lot of people have seen kind of a barrage of headlines in the last year affecting higher education. So, at this panel on September 8th, we're going to dig into how that impacts our local institutions. But I think you're a good person to ask this question to because you're looking at it statewide. You're researching the effects at large institutions, like you mentioned, all the way down to some of the institutions that have closed in the last year.
Yeah. And I will add that, again, there is significant uncertainty that remains. So, there has been attempts from the federal government to reduce some forms of research grant funding to universities in the state like UW-Madison, the Medical College of Wisconsin, and University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. Those have been held up in court. Those changes, if they were to go through, they would have a significant effect. Again, 5 years from now, or even less time than that, AI could start to have an impact on the business of higher education in some way, shape, or form. So, there's a lot of things we don't know, but I've learned in life that it's best to kind of focus on what is happening at the present. You can get yourself into trouble by trying to do too much to predict it.
Let's turn to the money now. We were watching the state budget process pretty much down to the wire this summer because there was a ton of money on the line for the UW system. Republicans were floating an $87 million cut to the UW system. They ended up kind of backing off of that. Can you kind of walk us through what happened?
Yes, absolutely. So, there was this discussion of possibly cutting the university system, even though the state had a more than $4 billion surplus in its general fund. Ultimately, what happened is you could characterize modest increases for the UW system. Right now, what you might describe as guaranteed funding will go up by a little over $35 million, or about 1.3% over the 2-year budget. But one thing that's worth noting is if you look at the total funding for UW, excluding debt payments, that would rise by 162 million over the 2 years. So, although the funding increases when you include debt payments are only modest, there is actually a little bit larger increase for the UW system for its operations and things outside of debt. So, at least compared to what was talked about at some points during the budget process, a relatively positive budget for the UW.
And it's within that context that both UW employees will be paid more, but also that the UW system has gotten the green light to increase tuition. So lots happening.
Correct. So then there's also potential tuition increases of roughly 5% that could occur.
So I plan to talk to the college and university leaders about this question at the panel on September 8th, but I also wanted to ask you about enrollment. Most higher education institutions are bracing for drops in enrollment in the coming years. Why is that?
We've just seen demographic changes in our state that go back to about 2011. Enrollment in higher ed increased in the late 90s and the 2000s. It's been down since then. And I say since 2010, it's been down in individual years, including in recent years, there's been some modest growth on UW campuses. But the overall trends are not particularly favorable for higher education, particularly in the upper Midwest, because, if you look at the classes at the kindergarten level statewide, they are smaller than the classes at the 12th grade level. And then also, you're seeing a larger percentage of those classes being composed of groups like students of color that attend higher education at lower rates, enroll in college and universities at lower rates, white or Asian students. So that those two things, just the classes getting smaller and then the demographics of those classes have just not been favorable to higher education.
At the same time, there may be a shift in who is filling those seats in college classrooms, right? Research released by the Wisconsin Policy Forum this summer shows that about 78,000 high school students across Wisconsin took classes through the dual enrollment programs last year, meaning they took college classes for college credit while they're still in high school. I wonder if you think that that does show that there's a shift in who is going to college and when, even as we're dealing with lower enrollment rates for freshman classes.
I would agree that there has been a shift, and the dual enrollment, I think, is one of the positive signs in our state where you see more students taking advantage of that. You also see more students taking advantage of advanced placement classes. And together, those are ways that students at the high school level can get college credit that they could put towards an associate's degree or a bachelor's degree or some other kinds of credentials they can get within the post-secondary world. So I think from the standpoint of families and education in our state, that's very positive. I think for the higher education institutions themselves, it's positive, no doubt, but it is a little bit of a mixed bag in that from the business of higher ed standpoint, because a lot of those dual enrollment students are attending a high school and a technical college. That's the dual enrollment because they're enrolled at both. And, in not all cases are the technical colleges getting paid for those classes or getting paid at what you might call full price. So, it's definitely a positive development, but not necessarily one that is going to be usually beneficial to the bottom lines of colleges and universities in the state.
Finally, attendees at the panel discussion on September 8th are going to hear from kind of a cadre of Milwaukee higher education leaders. We'll have Marquette University President Kimo Ayun, we'll have Milwaukee Area Technical College President Anthony Cruz, University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee Chancellor Thomas Gibson, and Eric Baumgartner, the incoming president of the Milwaukee School of Engineering. Those are a lot of new names. They might be names that listeners aren't familiar with. Dr. Cruz is the most seasoned in his role because he took the top job at MATC in July of 2024, whereas Dr. Baumgartner doesn't even start his job till January. What does it mean to have all four major institutions of higher ed in Milwaukee switching leadership at the same time? What do you think it's going to mean for Milwaukee moving forward?
It's a great question. And partly we wanted to hold this event that we're partnering on to find out. So I don't want to, come to any definitive conclusions before we hear from these participants themselves. But I mean, clearly higher education is in a period of flux. It's a time when, I think in many ways it's as valuable as it ever has been in terms of producing important research, producing graduates with people that get an engineering credential, a nursing credential, an accounting degree. There are many very marketable credentials that people are acquiring as they go to college and universities. It could be, learning to weld, whatever it is. And that is making a huge difference for people's bottom lines, both businesses and individuals. But at the same time, I think the general public has this real doubts about higher education, both the value of it and, that shows up in polling. That shows up, I think, in some ways in the clash between the federal administration and many higher education institutions. I mean, most of that clash is happening outside of Wisconsin and has not been as impactful here inside the state, but it's still something obviously that I'm sure these higher ed leaders are watching very carefully. I think we're really at a time of transition here. And I think the opportunity is for these new leaders that they can come in and take the reins and dynamically respond to these challenges.
Thank you, and I guess we'll have to see what our panelists say about that as well. A reminder that WWM has partnered with the Wisconsin Policy Forum for a Policy in a Pub event. It's on September 8th at 5 p.m. at Merriman Social in Walker's Point. We would love for you to join us to hear more of what Jason had to say, as well as from our panelists, who are leaders of higher education institutions across Milwaukee. You do need to register for the event. You can do that at wuwm.com.
That was WUWM education reporter Catherine Kogel speaking with Jason Stein, the president of the Wisconsin Policy Forum. WUWM is a service of UW-Milwaukee. Wisconsinites have access to a variety of public records and the ability to file open records requests. One of the most widely used public records is CCAP. It allows anyone to do a quick search of someone's court records. These records exist to provide transparency, and while that might seem like a positive thing, it's not always used that way. WUWM's Jimmy Gutierrez brings us a story about what CCAP is and how it can be used for good and bad.
CCAP, better known as CCAP, some of the most important letters in the state of Wisconsin. Consolidated Court Automation Programs gives anyone with a computer or phone the ability to look up personal court records. It's almost a coming-of-age story for most of us. Who was the first person you CCAP'd? What did you find?
For a number of years, I used to work at different law firms. And at work, we would use CCAP on a pretty regular basis for different things. And that's how I first became aware of it. And once I knew about it, I started looking up all different kinds of people in my life just out of curiosity. and there were some surprises.
I have found out many interesting things through CCAP, such as one person who was becoming stalkerish actually had a history of restraining orders. And even as crazy as one person that I dated for over a decade on and off had gotten married in the last couple of years and not shared that with me.
Then when I was single and dating, I would look up potential dates as part of my vetting process whenever I would meet someone. Soon I became the person who all my friends would send their potential dates information to, and I would look them up as well and report back.
So I've used CCAP to look up myself to see if anybody has filed anything against me or how my other court cases were going for speeding tickets, if there was anything on there for when I applied for a job. Since I am in the criminal justice field, just like to know what would possibly show up on my background.
So pre-COVID, I was managing a bar on the east side and we had a regular who came in like clockwork. This was during the first Trump term, and this regular constantly brought up politics and race issues with an opinion that differed from most of the clientele and the staff. After talking to some downtown bar workers and learned he trolled people at other bars too, following an incident at my bar, I decided to ban him. I did it politely and before he entered the bar one day. Months later, I received a restraining order against myself from him. I had zero desire to interact with him at all, but now have a pending restraining order on my CCAP, which makes it kind of hard to date, among other things. The situation was taken care of and I no longer look like a creep. This was some wild blowback for banning a racist.
So my name is Gilbert Malice. I'm with Legal Aid Society of Milwaukee. I'm an attorney here, and I'm handling the eviction sealing clinic that we run monthly every second Wednesday of the month.
Legal Aid offers a sealing clinic for people looking to seal up past records that may pop up on CCAP, specifically evictions. The service can save someone a few $100s in court costs, but an untold amount of money in securing safe housing if they can improve their public record. I'm talking to Gil today to learn some more about the clinic, the ways CCAP affects people, and to learn a little bit more about myself. All right, Gil. So I'm here, and we're going to run a CCAP on me and see if I have any housing history I should be aware of or any eviction history.
We're going to see everything in Milwaukee County court system. So what is your last name?
Gutierrez.
All right, so we're just going to take a search. All right, so it looks like one thing came up, but...
All right, so I can explain. It's actually pretty simple advice now. Don't co-sign anything when you're young. But even though this case showed up on my record, that doesn't mean it's active.
The court in 2010 did say, as to you, this action was dismissed.
Going over this CCAP journey, I was relieved to hear this, but I was also really frustrated that this is showing up on my record. So when you're talking with folks, when people come up to you, what do you look for when you pop up their CCAP?
So we check for eviction records first. If they don't have any eviction records, great. They were either sealed or they didn't have an eviction. We look for the case. In an eviction case, we'll look at it, check the case code. It's a small claims eviction case, that the case is closed. If it's ongoing, they still have court. They still have things they need to do. Legal Aid may be able to help them with that. But in this particular clinic, we look that it's closed. And then we, first and foremost, look, is there a judgment? The judgment is a signifier of, was there something bad that had happened in the case? If something bad happened, they owe some money. The judge right now says, hey, we're not going to seal it. If we don't see any of that, then I start going through the details of the case. What happened? Did it get dismissed? Is it dismissed in part? Who's it against? Make sure that it all fits with the person I'm talking to. And when I can confirm that the case is dismissed, I can confirm that the person didn't have an eviction granted against them, they weren't removed from their home, they had an agreement maybe. Did they complete that agreement? Then I can assist them with filling out the paperwork to request that this eviction be redacted as to their name.
How do you see CCAP used in eviction processes within landlords and tenants' rights? Is it usually weaponized or utilized?
So from my standpoint, I am a tenant defense attorney. I only see it from the defendant's side of when they have the eviction filed, what they're trying to do to find new housing. I see it as weaponized. I know that it is a tool to search records, but that tool is used against a lot of people. When I first started doing volunteering for eviction defense, when I was in law school, we saw a lot of landlords search CCAP, use CCAP to say, was there an eviction granted against you? Not did you have one filed, not did you have an eviction record at all, but were you evicted from the home? And the answer would be, well, no, I moved out, I resolved it. The eviction record on CCAP would say dismissed, and that would stay on their record for 10 years. but it was dismissed, they'd find new housing. In the past 6 or 7 years, we've seen a shift where if the eviction has been filed, landlords will say, look, we need double security deposit, you're a risk, whether it's granted, whether it was resolved or not. And in lately, we've seen that if you have any evictions filed, we will not rent you. It's on websites for landlords. If you search for applications, it'll say no evictions, no eviction filings. So we get a lot of people saying, look, I have these old evictions, they're on my record, they were dismissed, I've had payment plans, I've resolved them, but it's still impacting my ability to find housing. That's when we look at the CCAP ceiling and redaction.
And how long do things stay on people's records too?
So if there's a judgment that was granted, they owe some money, that can stay on the record for up to 20 years until it's either paid, waived, or discharged. If there's a dismissed eviction, so there's no judgment, no money owed, they weren't evicted, that will only stay on their CCAP record for 2 years. It used to be 10, but they did change it. We have asked for it to be shorter than 2 years, but even 2 years can pose a significant barrier to people finding housing.
Okay, going to jump in right here because what we're talking about is potential housing discrimination. But that's not the only way that CCAP can be used and has been used to discriminate. It's also affected people looking for work.
There are plenty of cases where when you search on CCAP, it comes up and it says this case has not been concluded, this case has been convicted, not convicted, and it says notice to employers. If you want to look, I do have a case that I can pull up that's okay. It just says, in notice it may be a violation of state law to discriminate against a job applicant because of an arrest or conviction record. Landlords still use this. We know that for evictions. Anyone can search CCAP. You don't need a law degree. You don't need anything. You can just punch someone's name in, look at it, see a case come up, and you don't have to care what's happening with the case. But the fact that there's something on CCAP says that they were sued, they were arrested potentially. There's fines, fees, something. With all of that information, they can say, well, maybe we don't want to hire this person, even if it's 5, 10, 20 years ago, right?
The last question is just your general thoughts on CCAP. Not good, not bad, nuanced.
It is very nuanced because CCAP is a tool, and tools can be used very well. Without having to go to the courthouse, without having to find records, it makes my job very easy. I get to just sit behind a laptop, and when someone comes to me and say, hey, I'm looking for help on this, I can pull it up and get a general understanding of what's going on. But then when they have personal questions about, well, what happened at this date, this time, what does this document say? I can't review that without going to the courthouse. So there's the good, the bad. But when it comes down to someone searching CCAP, using that name, finding something, and just jumping with that, making conclusions, making assumptions, it gets very difficult. And it can be weaponized and used against people. And usually, in my experience, that is used against the poor and underprivileged. It is used against people who, through no fault of their own, have circumstances that lead to this, whether it's convictions, whether it's evictions, whether it's even money claims. And with all of that, you don't get the details of what's actually happening. You make those assumptions, you use it against that person, and now it leads to a whole load of issues for them that just continues that cycle.
That was legal aid attorney Gil Malice. He spoke with WUWM's Jimmy Gutierrez about CCAP. Did you know you can listen to Lake Effect as a podcast? Search for Lake Effect wherever you listen to your podcast to download and hear us on demand. In about 15 minutes, we'll tell you how to plan a canoe or kayak trip down the Wisconsin River. But first, we'll learn why the Driftless region is a quintessential fly fishing destination.
Even if you're frustrated and this isn't going as easily as you'd hoped it would, you look around, you step into a stream, you hear that noise of a little babbling brook, and you see bird life and plant life and insects, and it's just such a lovely experience.
That's coming up on Lake Effect on Milwaukee's NPR. You're listening to Lake Effect on Milwaukee's NPR. I'm Audrey Nowakowski. There are countless reasons to visit Wisconsin's Driftless region. The landscape of steep river valleys, exposed rock formations, and forested ridges are ideal for any outdoor enthusiast. The area is full of meandering streams and rivers with cold spring-fed water pushing through the rocks, making the Driftless region one of the best trout fishing habitats in the whole country. Trout season runs through October 15th with some of the best fishing conditions in the fall. So, to help you plan a fly fishing trip to the Driftless, Lake Effect's Becky Mortensen is joined by Jerry Meyer, the owner of the Driftless Angler, and Logan Rogie with Travel Wisconsin.
In researching this topic, I was pretty surprised to learn that there are like 30 different ways you can fish. So, Jerry, let's just start with the basics. What is fly fishing and what sets it apart from other kinds of fishing?
So fly fishing is the use of primarily pretty much all artificial lures or bait. We use a fly rod and fly reel, and the idea of this is to aerialize your bait or lures or whatever, we call them flies. And the idea is to basically fool a fish into thinking that what is landed in front of them is a bug. But the idea, yes, is to keep them in the air and to place them in front of fish. And then as current comes back, we strip them to us. It's a little more interactive. To me, it is, I find it a little more interesting personally.
And what makes the Driftless region an ideal destination for fly fishing?
Our particular area within the Driftless is they're mostly spring-fed creeks and streams. So what that means is that water that's coming directly from the source from the earth is staying at more consistent temperatures. And in the winter months, it's staying a bit warmer towards those springs. And because these are all very small, so they regulate temperature a little bit quicker, which means for trout, especially trout, they really, really need cold water. And so this area is ideal for that because the springs keep them a little bit warmer in the winter months and cooler in the summer months typically. So it's basically very, very healthy for cold water fish, namely trout. For us, because we are a trout shop, it's perfect. These streams are great for us to guide and great for us to, welcome others who want to come fish for trout.
And what are the best conditions for fly fishing in the Driftless?
Well, conditions as far as for the fish are it's a little bit different for them for the angler. There are certainly these fish really want cold water, and so that's what makes it ideal here. So, for us, the sweet spot as far as when fish are going to be feeding, maybe as low as 48 degrees, could go between 54 and 55. That's kind of prime. Maybe even up to 58 degrees is in that area is when they're going to probably be feeding the most abundantly. And our water temps will generally stay pretty consistent within that in our spring and our fall months. Summertime can get a little bit warm, but once the sun goes down and we've had enough time for these small streams to cool down, our mornings can be really good. Sometimes evenings can be really good. And they are very, very active in May, typically very active in early June, and then again into September and the first 2 weeks of October is also. So we usually say our busiest, best months are September and May.
All right. For someone who has never tried fly fishing before, what are some things they should know, and what can your shop, the Driftless Angler, provide them if it's their first go at this?
So I always tell people it looks so easy. We all watched the Brad Pitt movie, The River Runs Through It, and romanticized about, oh, this, you see that beautiful ribbon line moving, and everybody thought, oh, we can do this. It's no big deal. And there's a pretty steep learning curve to this. I kind of think it's similar to golf. We have this idea that we need to be really strong and powerful, and that's kind of just the opposite. You really need more in the way of meter and timing. A bit of muscle as you get into bigger fish and bigger rods, but yeah, it's really more about meter timing, knowing that you're not going to be, most people aren't good at it right away. You've got to, it takes some practice, but the nice thing about it is that you are in the most spectacular areas. I mean, they say that trout don't live in ugly places, and as cliche as it is, it's definitely true. And I would say that this area of the Driftless especially is just stunning. So even if you're frustrated and this isn't going as easily as you'd hoped it would, you look around, you step into a stream, you hear that noise of a little babbling brook, and you see bird life and plant life and insects, and it's just such a lovely experience. So patience, and then to continue coming back and doing it again in a really pretty place. I mean, it's all win, right?
Yeah, at least you're outside, even if you're not catching
Exactly.
anything.
Yeah.
And you offer guided fly fishing trips. What could someone expect if they signed up for one of those?
We do. And so trout season isn't year round in Wisconsin. So it begins the first Saturday in January and it ends the second week, so the 15th of October. So we do guide through most of that. Um, as a brand new person, the first thing we'll do is we will find some water and I'll teach people how to set the rods up. We'll talk a little bit about lines and leaders and tippet and all the stuff. And then do a casting clinic, because I think for us, all the guides that work with us and for us, the goal is to teach you how to do this in hopes that you're going to be able to keep coming back and doing it on your own. So we do like fundamentals. We make sure you really, really have a solid cast. And then we go to the water and we teach people how to read water and what bugs are going to work, at that particular time. Um, Typically we'll go over, just the basic bugs that we're going to see here and how we imitate them with certain flies that we get from the shop. So education is a big part of it. We're going to be teaching throughout the day. We do have half day sessions as well as full days. Half days are 4 hours on the water and full days are 8 hours on the water. And it's just basically A to Z. We're going to try to cover as much as we can with the amount of time that we've got.
And for our more experienced fly fishers who might be coming to the area, are there a couple of spots you'd recommend they check out for the best fly fishing?
Well, so I will say that as a rule, fly shops and guides and probably more experienced anglers, they're probably not going to ask for spots. We don't generally give them. What we tell people is come into our shop. We will give you a map and we will mark a few spots and start people off that way. Simply, the other thing is that there could be one stream that's just fishing lights out crazy right now. And in a matter of days to maybe even a week, it can, be crummy. So we, as guides, we fish as much as we can. We pay attention, when our guides are talking, what's fishing well and where. And that way we have, knowledge that we can give people day to day.
That makes good sense. So turning to you now, Logan, what are some other things people can do in the Driftless region on a late summer or early fall visit?
Yeah, for another activity, outdoor lovers should definitely travel to nearby Ontario, Wisconsin. This is the base camp for paddling the Kickapoo River, and it's a must-do experience for the area. You're going to find several outfitters in Ontario that are renting kayaks, canoes, and tubes. And the Kickapoo, it's a relatively gentle river, so it makes for a great river to paddle for those who may be new to the sport. Fall is certainly a great time to paddle too, with those cooler temperatures and colors reflecting off the water. For another quintessential fall activity, definitely visit one of the apple orchards in the area. Not far from Viroqua is the community of Gays Mills, and it's actually one of Wisconsin's powerhouse apple growing regions. So you're going to find a ton of orchards there. One you might want to check out is Sunrise Orchards. They actually grow 20 plus varieties of apples. And of course, they are using those apples to make delicious pastries and sweets like their famous apple cider donuts.
And where are some places people could stay in the Viroqua area?
I'd suggest the Hotel Fortney in Viroqua for a historic and boutique experience. The hotel was built in 1899 in the Queen Anne style. After falling into some disrepair, the building went through an extensive restoration and it reopened a couple years ago. The results are absolutely fantastic. It's maintained this timeless elegance. Original design elements like stained glass windows and tin ceilings have been beautifully preserved, while they've also introduced modern amenities and comforts. Another option, if you want to keep surrounding yourself in nature, is to check out the Kickapoo Valley guest cabins. It's a gorgeous property tucked away in those forested rolling hills that define the Driftless about half an hour east of Viroqua. So you're going to spend the night in cozy cabins that are full of rich woodwork and warm decoration. Be sure to step outside at night too. The stars in this part of Wisconsin are truly fantastic.
And if people aren't cooking up the trout that they caught for dinner, what are some restaurants people could check out in the area?
You should definitely check out Driftless Cafe for lunch or dinner. The restaurant prioritizes locally grown seasonal ingredients. They actually work with many of the more than 200 organic farmers in Vernon County to craft these farm fresh flavors. So the lunch menu, it's kind of like an ode to elevated comfort food. I still think of the fish sandwich I had there a few years ago. That's how you know it was a memorable meal. Their dinner menu too changes nightly based on what's available and what the restaurant is experimenting with. Another terrific option is maybe Lately's. They're open for breakfast and lunch and have some really awesome sandwiches, egg dishes, and more. I've had a coworker speak highly of them. If you're out there on a Monday too, be sure to check out the pizza night they host. They're serving up these creatively topped Detroit style pizzas. And then finally, for a little pre-fishing pick-me-up, you can check out Wonder State Coffee. They brew exceptional coffee and they're committed to doing so in a sustainable way. Their roasting facility is 100% solar powered, and you've also got a great selection of pastries. I can personally vouch for the scones there. They're great.
Nice. So, Jerry, what is something everybody new and seasoned should know before they go fly fishing?
So I think I would say the most important thing is try to hang up your competitive hat. Try to, and it's easier said than done, for some, myself included, but understand that this area, I've fished, I guess, really all over the world. And I absolutely love big fish. I love, challenging fish. The standard size fish here isn't huge. It's small, but they're wild and they're gorgeous. And the area is gorgeous. And this is a slow pace. It's a super chill vibe. So coming here, understand that, you're going to see some spectacular views. And it's just a place to relax, have fun, and enjoy it. And I know perhaps cliche, but this isn't the place that you come and stress. This is the place that you come and unwind. And catching a fish, catching a beautiful wild trout, like that's just the cherry on top. So come here and maybe let the expectation be to just relax and enjoy it, and the fishing, will match your energy.
Well said. Well, Jerry and Logan, thank you both for joining me for Wandering Wisconsin.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
You and me going fishing in the dark, lying on our backs and counting the stars.
Jerry Meyer is the co-owner of the Driftless Angler in Viroqua. Logan Rogie is a senior communications specialist with Travel Wisconsin. They both join Lake Effect's Becky Mortensen for Wandering Wisconsin, our monthly conversation where we help you plan a trip in our home state. If fishing maybe isn't your thing, but you do enjoy getting out on the water, you could plan a late summer canoe trip down the Wisconsin River. The Wisconsin Canoe Company offers canoe and kayak rentals and the opportunity to spend the night on a sandbar in the middle of the Wisconsin River. To share how it all works, Lake Effect's Becky Mortensen is joined by Ryan Schmudlock, the owner of the Wisconsin Canoe Company.
The Wisconsin Canoe Company calls what you offer a paddling experience for outdoor enthusiasts of all levels. So you all offer a variety of things, and I'm going to start with the more beginner level. So that's day trips. Ryan, can you share a bit about what that experience would be like?
Yeah, so, day trips on the Wisconsin, if you can't go overnight, day trip is certainly better than nothing. Imagine this riverway, the last 92 miles of it have been protected from development for several decades now. And there wasn't a lot of development to begin with out there. And so when you're going down this river valley, you're kind of surrounded by these tree-lined bluffs on both sides, no houses, no docks, no motorboats really. you've just got these big, beautiful sandbars. I mean, imagine miles and miles of deserted beaches, and you can, kind of paddle up, coast onto any one you see that you like, hang out for a little while, have some lunch, play in the water, jump off the sandbars. For being a guy that lives in a van down by the river, it's kind of hard for me to really put this into words. It's just kind of something you have to experience.
Yeah, so now overnight trips. You say the sandbars are the reason people do these trips. So what's an overnight canoe trip like on the Wisconsin River?
Yeah, so going overnight, obviously you've still got the scenic value during the day, but what I love about it is, as the sun starts to go down, everything kind of quiets down, and it's just incredibly serene out there. There's the animals, the turtles, the eagles are out and about, and then as the sun goes down, you're feeling this quietness settle over the valley, and you're kind of alone out there almost, and it's just an experience you don't really get in the Midwest. It's fairly unique. It does bring its interesting points where you are in a sandbar, you are in the middle of nowhere, and it's just so much different than what you might expect going to a state park campsite. This is still an organization or a part of the DNR, but it's not a state park. It's its own unique thing.
So pretty unique camping experience.
For sure.
So let's talk about how you'd recommend people get ready for an overnight stay with, kind of like you said, basically no amenities besides what nature has to offer. So what should people know and plan to bring?
So going down the Wisconsin River, it's a dispersed kind of camping experience. There are no campsite numbers, there's no fire pits, there's no picnic tables, there's no bathrooms. So it's kind of everything that you're going to bring, you need to bring with you. And so this is kind of a nice intro, really, if you're not used to dispersed camping. There's not portaging. There's plenty of room in your canoe, and so you can have those amenities like a cooler with ice. You can bring all of your big, bulky camping gear. It doesn't have to be this ultralight setup or anything like that. It helps that a lot of people have everything you would already need to go out on the river. Some kind of unique challenges are, I mentioned the lack of bathrooms. That's one that can kind of surprise people a little bit. You have options. You can always bring a little portable toilet tent. There's certainly room for that. The only other, thing I like to warn people about, or at least prepare them for, is that this is a very sandy environment. You are on a sandbar. Sand will get everywhere, and if you're not careful, the worst place to get it is in your food. So it's certainly worth a little bit of careful planning when you set up your kitchen and when you're cooking, and keeping people away from the food and kicking sand in everything you eat. Nothing ruins your sandwich or your brat quite like a crunchy bit of seasoning, if you want to call it. But yeah, other than that, I mean, it really is it's a fairly straightforward thing, and it's, like I said, a great intro to people that wanted to do more of a kind of remote, dispersed camping experience.
Let's talk about what you all offer. So there's transportation, people can rent a kayak or a canoe. Can you talk about how this process works?
I guess the very first thing we try to do, and this applies to everybody, not even just our customers, but anybody that is looking for information on how to go out on this river and, not have the experience where they never want to come back, like we were kind of talking about. That starts with kind of dumping everything we know onto the website, what to expect, what it's like, the logistics of the bathrooms, things like that. So after we've kind of got that information out of the way, people have decided this is for them, they want to come out with us, they'll make a reservation. And so, yeah, we provide transportation. They come out to us. We kind of park everybody at the end of their trip, which is a little bit unique. So then when we can take people upriver, drop them off, and they kind of paddle back to their cars. And so they're able to finish on their pace. You're not worried about trying to paddle as fast as you can to, oh my gosh, the bus is going to leave in 3 minutes and we're 10 miles away. Like, what's going to happen? We're stranded. That's kind of one of the big selling points of our transportation system. Of course, we also provide the canoes, the kayaks. There's dry bags. There's, all the kind of firewood accessories that you might want to have out on the river that people wouldn't normally necessarily have on their own.
So how far do people need to paddle?
We cover a fairly small part of the river. We focus more on the overnight trips, kind of like a weekend or long weekend type options. We've got 10, 18, 25-mile options. There are, it's perfectly reasonable to do the full 92.3 miles from the last dam all the way to the Mississippi. I've done that a few times, and it's a great experience. The entire river is worth being on.
This part of the Wisconsin River is pretty shallow. I read that maybe somebody walked it in your first year that you were open. So water levels do play a pretty big role in these trips. What are the ideal conditions that are needed?
Yeah, so we are very much dependent on kind of the rainfall in the greater Wisconsin area. This river drains a third of the state. And so water levels, of course, if there's nowhere to stop, nowhere to camp, that's a problem. And so what you're really looking for, everything's kind of measured in cubic feet per second. We're looking for under 15,000 cubic feet per second. When you get below that, your sandbars start coming up. You've got places to stop, places to camp. And then beyond that, really you could go anytime you wanted to. We've got people that come out in April. We've got people that come out all the way into the fall with the leaves. I've paddled this river in the winter. I don't recommend that, but you can certainly do it. But the ideal, you're looking for the weather to be in that nice, pleasant daytime temperature, like 70, 80 degrees. So yeah, if you really had to choose something, that nice late summer, low water level, lots of sandbars to choose from, light winds, maybe a little breeze out of the east, kind of push you along a little bit so you can float, do a little bit less work. And of course, sunny is beautiful, and then you've got your nice crisp nights for some campfires, and I'd say that's where it's at for sure.
Ryan Schmudlock is the owner of the Wisconsin Canoe Company. He spoke with Lake Effect's Becky Mortensen last summer. We'll take one more break and then conclude our summer reading series with a book recommendation about what's in a name. Keep listening to Lake Effect on 89.7 WUWM. This is Lake Effect on 89.7 WUWM. I'm Audrey Nowakowski. As summer comes to an end, many parents are looking to get their kids ready for the school year. Many students experience what's known as the summer slide, a slight regression in skills brought on by months of being outside the classroom. It's a predicament that Danette Justice is all too familiar with. Justice is an educator with Milwaukee Public Schools and the founder of Just Us and Books, a literacy program that introduces kids to new books. Danette joins Lake Effect's Joy Powers to share one of her favorite books about an important topic, names.
Now you have a lovely book here for us. Tell us a bit about it.
Well, I know it is nearing time for us to go back to school. The name of this story is called My Name is a Story, and it's actually by the Grammy Award-winning artist Ashanti. I chose this book because, like I said, as we're nearing school, I always feel like names are so important. And it's so important to pronounce names correctly, understand how special our names are, maybe learn what their meaning is. And so I thought this was the perfect book as we all enter into new classrooms and students are going back to school and sharing different names and being respectful of everyone's names.
It's an interesting thing, especially as somebody who works in radio.
Mm-hmm.
I deal with a lot of names,
Yes.
and I can't tell you how much time it'll take between something getting to us and us actually recording things, because we make sure everyone's name is pronounced as well as we can pronounce it.
Absolutely.
Names are important.
Names are important. Names are important. And I think that sets the tone in the classroom and just in life. If you are pronouncing someone's name correctly, you're showing them that respect. You're showing them that care for the person. And so I just thought that this was the perfect book for explaining that names are powerful.
A lesson for all of us. The illustrations are really lovely here once again. What is it that attracts you and attracts kids to this story?
I think, number one, our author is Miss Ashanti, who is a famous African-American singer, beautiful lady. And she's actually talking about her own name in the book. And so I think people will be able to make a connection to that when they think of their own name. I know that was my initial draw to it, was actually a student in the classroom who I kept mispronouncing her name, and I kept asking her to repeat it, and it just would not click for me. But I wanted her to understand that I respect you and your name so much that if I have to ask you 10 times, just tell me, because I want to get it right. I don't want to mispronounce your name. So that was definitely the draw.
Well, thank you so much for bringing this in, and thank you for joining us once again.
Thank you.
That was Danette Justice, founder of Just Us and Books, chatting with Lake Effect's Joy Powers. At WUWM.com, you can find a video of Danette reading My Name is a Story, along with 3 other books to help kids fight the summer slide. And that's Lake Effect for today. I'm Audrey Nowakowski. Joy Powers, Sam Woods, and Excrit Nunez join me in producing Lake Effect each week with help from Rob Larry and Graham Thomas. Becky Mortensen is our executive producer. Emily Files helps edit the show. We also heard from Catherine Kokel, Taryn Powell, Eddie Morales, Maria Peralta Ariano, and Susan Benz from the WUWM News team this week. Jason Reevy is our studio engineer, Michelle Maternowski is our digital manager, Blair Navarro-Villegas is our digital editor, Trapper Shep wrote our theme music. If you've missed any of Lake Effect this week, you can find all of our conversations at WUWM.com. If you'd like to take the show on the go, simply download the Lake Effect podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts. Lake Effect is off for Labor Day on Monday. Instead, you'll hear Niche to Meet You. Every hobby has a story. It introduces listeners to the benefits of hobbies by exploring little-known niche interests like Rubik's speed cubing, competitive puzzling, dog agility, and much more. Lake Effect will be back with new local stories and conversations next Tuesday. Thank you so much for joining us today, right here on listener-supported 89.7 WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR.